I'm also curious, like just looking at the cast and that you put together, not only cast, but people you work with in every regard. How many geniuses did you work with on this movie?
How many people you pack in one room? I know, it was just, it astounds me still. I can't imagine how any of that happened. People came in through, every pore of my life, and so some people, some of the more modern, current comedians came in through, they knew Yellow Tango, and some people I had met through, Daniel Lennon I actually cast through when I was doing the labs. I found him and cast him at that point. But other people, Xander Berkeley actually, that had a connection here because he didn't end up shooting the movie, but there was a cinematographer who was going to shoot the movie who had a movie in South by, and Xander and Kevin were both in that movie. So I went to go see that movie, and Xander Berkeley actually had been a gopher, had worked as a messenger at my parents' studio. And in my memory, he was a really lame messenger. And I was just looking forward to seeing him so I could rag on him on what a lame messenger he was. Because I just remember all the ladies in the office going, "Oh, Xander, can I get you coffee?" And I'm like all fawning all over him. But then when I saw him here, he was really, got actually kind of serious about what an impact working there had on him. And so then I couldn't make so many jokes about it. But that was when I got the idea of his participating in the movie, and just sort of watching Kevin in that movie and knowing him, he was like, Kevin would really like this script. And so that was sort of a hint to bringing Kevin in. But people came from all over. I really wanted to have some representation of sort of more sort of historic New York stage actors, because growing up in New York and going to theater in New York, that always felt like that was the legitimate theater, acting, and I really wanted that to have a presence in the movie. And so I always wanted to include as many different sort of facets of sort of the cultural life that I grew up in, just so that it wouldn't just be 20-year-olds or whatever.
I feel like this is a good time to interject for if there's anyone in the audience who doesn't know who your parents were.
Yes, we're doing that tomorrow.
Faith and John Hubley. I'm going to stop saying Hubley. Faith and John Hubley were, of course, also renowned animators, and we're doing an entire program tomorrow after the toe tactic, which means tomorrow, tell all your friends, hit them over the head, make them come, you tell them how good it is. And then tomorrow night, for the Music Monday, we're showing a program of films, many having to do with musical collaborators and having to do with jazz, some not. But it's a program of films made by your parents who were probably, your father had worked for Disney, correct?
Yes.
And they had kind of gone off and become the really cool animation house. Faith and John had become the really cool animation house that was happening kind of outside of commercial concerns, more or less.
Well, yeah, it was sort of an evolution. It didn't just happen by itself. He was one of the, he was a big participant in the 41 big strike against Disney, and as a result of that, there were people that sort of left Disney to start UPA, and all of that sort of coincided with the political climate, which was not really just political, it was really about money and labor, the labor disputes that were going on in Hollywood then, but he ended up getting booted out of Hollywood, basically. So my mother always used to say that Blacklist was the best thing that ever happened to him. In a way, that was true, that they came to New York and then they, sort of were able to not just be art and jazz fanatics on their weekends, but they got to bring that into all of their work. And so,
and if you watch the films, it's really outside. They weren't making silly symphonies. It was a real kind of the beginning, really, of maybe not the beginning, but the best for me expression of animation and all this kind of beautiful cultural things coming together. In your movie in particular, one thing that marks your parents' films for me is the use of great actors and great voices. This movie, I think I could just close my eyes and enjoy it almost as much just because of the amazing voices that you have in this film.
Well, thank you.
Starting, of course, with Eli Wallach, but there's so many great figures of the stage who have voices that California somehow never really seems to get.
Marion Seldes is, she was great. She was going to do, she read Hathaway for us, and our readings, and she really sort of helped inspire the voice of Hadaway.
Yeah, the scene where one of the dogs comes into the real life and kind of scares her when she's walking down the park at night and asks for the bone back. I was wondering maybe if you could talk a little bit about that, because it's the first time I think that they like come from animation to live action.
Oh, well, actually they're coming the other times as well. That Honey, the red dog, is posing as the woman on the train. She sort of takes human form, and then she takes human form again when she's Jane Lynch in the bar. So that's actually Honey doing that. Yes, but Timmy is sort of the rule bender and the rule breaker, and so when he actually jumps in to attack her, that's going too far. But I was very much, into sort of setting up this, the set of rules of what they could do in their game and how the worlds could interact, and then I just stomped on that and broke all the rules. But I didn't really break all the rules. I do have explanations for all of the times when they're broken. But in that case, it's really just Timmy sort of going too far. That he's like, well, she took human form, I can take human form. So he sort of overshadows the stalker who actually follows her into the park in the first place. And but then when he grabs her, that's too much. You're not allowed to touch the subject. And so, yeah. So that's sort of what that was about. But then, but just the idea that, I don't know how much of this comes from just people, sort of people you might think are crazy on the street, or people who sort of poke into your life, and they'll say something, especially, so much of this movie is about being in a sort of fractured, uncertain period of your life. So in those times, you have some guy coming up to you and going, you know the secret. They'll just say something to you that's totally from their own mania, but you'll be like, you're right, I know the secret. So I really wanted to bring that sort of synchronicity that can happen, those things that you look at it from one point of view, you go like, oh, this crazy guy came up to me on the street, but then you're like, oh no, I was being given the answer, and that was what the answer was. So I wanted to sort of have fun with that interplay.
What's up with volleyball?
Oh, no, people ask that. It wasn't really, I did play volleyball, and it was very cool. Again, like the synchronicity thing, that when I asked Miriam to do the part, because she was the only actress I knew, I was like, oh, did you ever play volleyball? And she goes, oh yeah, I played volleyball in this international circuit of American schools. And it turned out that she played volleyball in the exact same tournaments and circuit that I played volleyball in about 10 years before her. And I was like, that's the right thing. There were all these little, I could go on forever. The elevator man's uniform actually was the only one that my costume person could get, and it turned out to be from the building where my parents' studio was for 10 years. Whoa. And there were all these little things that would happen that would be like, okay, you're on the right track, you're on the toe tactic. And but it wasn't like it was such a big thing. But Set Spike was originally part of the script, and Lactitia was going to be a poet who was reading at the open mic and using her poems to communicate with Wilson, because he was approaching puberty and didn't want to hear from her. So the way that she could express her feelings to him would be by making him attend her poetry readings. But there was too much poetry in the movie already, so I had to take that out. So it's not like I'm really so obsessed with volleyball. It was just that poem was in there as Lactitia's backstory. And then I made that as a test, because at some point I thought of making the whole movie in that way, using that, but it was such a work-intensive, and ultimately it would be unnecessary. It would lose its magic over, I think, the span of a feature-length movie. Yeah.